All right, welcome everyone. This is the December meeting of the Commission on Sustainability. I'm Mia Blum. I am co-chair. Today, I am just going to be saying very little and then handing the meeting over to the nominated co-chair, Jared, as well as our fellow commissioner, Regina Boyce, and other guests that we have, just to talk about our legislative agenda and hear what's going on, what's at top of mind for many people in the space that we all work in. And I just have a few updates to share. One, we're waiting on the nomination process for additional commissioners of Phil Costa and Morgan Grove, as well as the confirmation of Jared. So don't have those updates right now, but hopefully we'll have some of those updates soon. And most recently, on December 12th, Amy and I had the opportunity to attend a sustainable event planning certification at the Baltimore Convention Center with their team. This is the second time that the team has had the opportunity to have that training. Baltimore Convention Center, Visit Baltimore, and our city, they were the first ones to go through that initial training and be certified. So it's great that we are continuing that process. Again, now that there are a whole bunch of other fun attributes that the city has to tie on to that. I'm going to hand it over to Ava, who's going to give a few office updates.
All right, thank you, Mia. Good evening, everyone. Just to start, we did want to let everyone know that the Climate Action Plan approval by the Commission was pushed back to January of next year. So we will circle back to that topic and look forward to sharing the final version with everyone. So we are finalizing some additional edits. We'll also begin implementation next year for the Climate Action Plan, as well as the Disaster Preparedness Plan. And we'll be sharing some updates on engagement events that we'll be hosting sometime around February. In the office, we'll be recruiting for an environmental planner position that will focus on youth engagement. And we're hoping to get that position posted. Amy, do you have the live link for that, or do we not have it yet?
I checked earlier today and it wasn't up yet. I'll check again, and if we do have it, I'll put it in the chat. But I haven't heard from HR that it's up yet, so I'm not expecting that it's up right now.
But
we'll do a special announcement email blast when we do have it up.
Yep, definitely. So look out for that position. That'll be coming out pretty soon. We want to really get that spread broad and wide to get a great person to fill that role. And if you have any questions, you can contact Amy or myself about the position. Aside from that, we're really looking forward to discussing the schedule for next year in terms of the commission meetings and the topics that we'll be covering. So we'll go over that after we hear from all the nonprofit partners regarding their policy priorities for the 2024 legislative session. So those are all the updates from the office, I believe, unless Amy or Valerie, you have anything else to share?
I don't have anything.
Nothing now.
All right, great. So I'll pass it back to you, Mia.
Fantastic. I'm actually just going to hand it right on over to Jared.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Jared Lyles, as you all heard. I am the co-chair in waiting. So as soon as we get that approval, I'm excited to get started and dig into the commission. Today we're going to be talking about the legislative session preview. I know later on this year, one of our themes is community engagement. So one thing that we're going to be doing is talking about how to engage the elected officials on issues that might affect the community. So we've had a few people here that are going to talk about the state legislative process in an overview. And then a little bit after that, we're going to talk about the legislative session and have some speakers just talk about that from different organizations around the city. So first up, we have our very own Sustainability Commissioner, Delegate Regina Boyce. She's the delegate of the District 43A and a member of this commission. She serves as Vice Chair of Environment and Transportation Committee and is a member of the Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities. So And Delegate Boyce is going to start out a little bit and just talk about the legislative process overview.
Thank you, Mr. Soon-to-be official chair. I appreciate that. And thank you so much for allowing me to give a very, I think, needed sometimes overview of this work, and most importantly, how you can engage, and you can engage in so many different ways. And so, as Jared mentioned, I am the newly appointed vice chair of the House's Environment and Transportation Committee, and I am also the chair of the Natural Resources, Agriculture, and Open Spaces Subcommittee. And I want to first talk about the legislative 90-day session. We always start the second Wednesday of January and end the second Monday of April. I guess that's kind of constitutionally, but most importantly, we do not have holidays. And so when you're celebrating President's Day or MLK Day or all those other holidays, we are in session to fulfill that 90-day session. And so I just want to let you to know that if you'd like to visit the State House, you can certainly do so through one of your elected officials or by contacting the Department of Legislative Services for our visiting tour guides to give you a tour of the state capitol, which is always, I think, awesome and breathtaking to know that we are doing the work of the people in one of the oldest working state houses in the country. With that, session is so much easier to participate in now post-COVID. And so all of our floor sessions are videotaped or recorded, I should say, where you can actually watch it on the Maryland General Assembly website, or you can go to a YouTube channel and watch it. As it relates to committees, every committee also is streamed for the public, as well as again through a YouTube channel, or you can watch it right on the Maryland General Assembly website. Every before there's a session, every committee posts what the agenda for that day will be, so you'll know what bills will be heard. And for those who are interested in testifying on a bill, you can do so one or two or three ways. You can submit written testimony about 48 to 72 hours before the hearing. You can actually sign up to testify, going to my MGA. You can go to the website to sign up for an account of my MGA so that you can then submit testimony to any committee that you would like. Every committee has its own rules of how long an elected official or how long someone testifying in the public can testify. Some people it's 2 minutes, some people it's 3, so on and so forth. But you would have to check with that particular committee to find out what their rules are. And one thing I do want to talk about is essentially how you engage. And so through the 90-day session, we see a lot of individuals, whether it's schools, middle schoolers calling in to schedule their own time to come talk to their legislators, to tell them what their priorities are and what they care about, to national and local organizations meeting with certain delegates or certain committee members or certain senators around a topic or issue that they want to express interest in or want to express a position on, whether it's in opposition or in support. And in some cases, sometimes also saying they like this bill, but would we or would the committee think about some amendments that they may have. And that's all a part of the process. I should also say the subcommittees, which usually in the past were never essentially recorded. It'd just be a meeting room with whoever wanted to be a part of that meeting to participate in essentially the work of the committees. And so that is also now streamed for individuals to take part of. And that's really the place where if you are interested in a bill or you are interested in advocating or lending support or opposition or so forth on a bills, where we have essentially this discussion to work a bill. And so that is, the subcommittee looking at the content, talking it over, in some cases, taking additional testimony or hearing different statements from those who may support or don't support the legislation, so that we as a smaller group can vet it and then make a decision about whether or not that bill is going to actually pass out of subcommittee to then go to the full committee, or if we decide it needs more work and we'll take a couple of different subcommittee meetings to work through it. But that's essentially process. And if you are interested in those processes, all you have to do is email directly the delegate or the senator who may oversee that committee or subcommittee to ask to be a part of those subcommittee those meetings. And so, as I said before, we meet with, let me speak for myself. I meet with pretty much everyone. If you ask, sometimes people ask to meet and it's about something very arbitrary and doesn't have anything to do with the 90-day session. So I tell them I'm happy to meet with them after session. But for those interested in the bill, sometimes individuals want to meet with chairs or vice chairs or even committee members as it relates to bills that may not be in their subcommittees, but may essentially is a part of the committee in general, and they're looking for feedback or support or essentially sometimes opposition for legislation. And so that essentially is the process in and of itself. But it's a 90-day one, and it is like I said, every working day. And as the session becomes closer to the end of session, we work longer hours and sometimes also weekend hours to be able to get through agendas to meet sine die, which on the last day of session, that Monday in April 8th to be exact, we work until midnight, which means if a bill doesn't pass by midnight, it is essentially dead. And what we have to do is, unfortunately and unfortunately, we have to start all over again, which is the story of my life with a couple of my bills for this year. I'm starting that process all over again. And if there isn't anything else that anyone thinks per the group that I missed, I will move on to the next speaker.
Regina, are you able to talk a little? Sorry, Jared. Can you talk a little bit about how the commission engages with during the process, since that is different than some of what you shared?
How I want you to, or how you should, or?
Well, there's some ethics around how the commission needs to engage and how we but maybe we can talk about that at the end. That works.
Sure. I mean, I know in the past the commission has weighed in on a couple of bills of interest that may not only interest the commission and the commission's goals and strategies, but as it relates to potentially the city. And I'm sure as it relates to the city, you probably have to get feedback and approval from probably the mayor's office in that regard. But ethically, it all depends on the commission's although I haven't seen any ethical issues in the past with the commission weighing in on bills, at all. I would say the only ethical issue would be something that self-serves the commission in a way that shows some type of favor where they couldn't weigh in, or where someone like myself couldn't potentially weigh in. But other than that, the commission usually finds or engages in bills that meets the commission's own goals and strategies, as well as the city's, to support and uplift. And they've done that by sending letters of support through the process, and in some cases, where necessary and where I would say allowable, testimony has come in to those committees and for those particular bills.
Fantastic, thank you. I just wanted that to be shared with everyone on the call, so I appreciate that. Jared, I'm sorry for the interruption.
Oh, and I just wanted to add one thing I think Mia may be stressing is that as a commission, you speak as one body. So I couldn't decide that I wanted to speak on behalf of the commission without the commission knowing that I'm speaking on their behalf. And so it is important, I think, ethically, to make sure if you are the difference between you as a resident of the city providing testimony versus you providing testimony as a commissioner, which is right. So if Mia wants to lend her support for maybe a bill that I'm doing, she would write in as Mia Bloom of the 45th District weighing in on this particular thing because she has some passion or some subject matter expertise to add to it. She couldn't then say, yeah, and as a member of the Sustainability Commission. So I did want to make that clarification.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I guess we'll move on to our next speaker. We're going to save our questions just for the end, just for sake of time here. And I'll introduce our next speaker in the process. So we're going to talk a little bit about budgeting as it relates to the context of policy consideration. And we'll invite Stephanie Smith, who's also another member of the commission and represents the 45th District. To talk a little bit about the Appropriations Committee. She chairs that committee. Thank you.
I do not chair the Appropriations Committee, but I'm on the Appropriations Committee. So I don't want to insult my good chair, Ben Barnes of Prince George's County, who I just talked to earlier today.
Oops.
And yeah, no problem. And so again, it's always great to spend time with the Sustainability Commission. I think it's just there's a lot of good work that has happened in Annapolis over the past several years to address issues like climate change, to enhance opportunities around transit, and to also have just cleaner vehicles available to the public. So there's just a lot of good work that has been made possible because of the advocacy of some of the people you're even going to hear from, later in today's presentation. But I want to couch all of that good work that has been passed, as well as work that is pending within the budget realities that we'll be finding ourselves facing in the 2024 session. So the state's budget is approximately $63 billion a year. And there have been some considerable investments that have been made that are going to create a structural deficit in outlying years if we do not make certain decisions in the intervening years. And so right now, the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, sometimes referred to as the Kirwan Bill, which is about creating a 10-year investment in public education to reimagine education, not only for competition, domestically, but internationally, and to ensure that every Maryland student by 10th grade is college and career ready, not or. Those investments are about just over $3 billion over 10 years. And it also has a component that local jurisdictions at the county and city level have to contribute. So the reason why I'm mentioning this endeavor is that if we were not to make any changes in our budgeting by fiscal year 2028, we would be looking at a $2.2 billion deficit. Primarily driven by our state's obligations to fulfill our investments in the blueprint. And so right now, I think many people have seen kind of a first blush, like a little peek into maybe the thinking of the current gubernatorial administration that at least recently has released their proposals around their budget commitments on transportation. And transportation is obviously an issue of considerable importance to this commission. And also as a sector, it is an incredibly important sector when you're thinking about how do you address climate change, how do you address just even regular toxic and general unsafe emissions that compromise air quality and so forth and so on, which I know are all at the macro level, things of great concern to this commission. And it's also about getting people to all the places they need to be, and they need to be relied upon by others, whether that's the workplace, school, healthcare, you name it, right? And so the budget proposal for transportation has created a lot of critique and a lot of, to be frank, considerable concern that many riders in the Baltimore region are going to be even more likely to have less access to the reliable transit that they often depend on, not simply as choice riders, but as people who expect a service and need it to get to all the places that they need to get to in life. And so I want to kind of frame any advocacy that you're going to be making around any policy considerations in the 2024 session are going to be filtered through what the budget realities are. There might be some proposals that the commission is supportive of that really don't have meaningful budget impacts, and those will be easier, I think, for people to have those conversations. But as soon as there's a significant, cost attached to a proposal, all of that is going to be filtered through the backdrop of our, current limitations financially. And I would be remiss if I didn't add that it's not simply that we've chosen to make life-changing generational investments in public education that we will have in the structural deficit. It's also the complete loss of federal funds and the federal largesse that has been made available to many jurisdictions across the country because of the COVID pandemic and those pass-through dollars and considerable investments from the federal government that were time-bound and are now gradually drawing down or sunsetting. So it's a combination of both of those forces. And so I've been telling many advocates, not just in this space, but in all spaces, that they may have to be more sensitive to the budget constraints around the proposals they're advocating for. And they also might want to consider identifying opportunities for revenues or other fund sources as they are making appeals for the substance of the bills that they care about too. And that may be a new set of advocacy, talking about fund sources and kind of addressing the budget. But if what you want to address involves money, we're going to have to be creative about how we tackle these incredibly important issues that the Sustainability Commission is designed to address, and that our city, particularly Baltimore, a legacy industrial city with all of the beauty and challenges that point to that history, and many of those things manifesting in environmental, hazards or challenges, we just are going to have to think about the budget, not just the policy. And that's, I think, a little different than maybe what we've contended with in recent years. So I just wanted to lift that up.
Thank you, Stephanie. We will move on for sake of time. I see you have some questions over in sort of related questions over in the chat. Again, we don't have time to get to these today, but we'll do our best to respond by the end of the meeting. Next, I want to talk about the legislative session, or have someone talk about the legislative session preview. We're going to invite Kristen Haberson, I hope I got that right, political director of the Maryland League of Conservation Voters. Kristen is the political director, and the League of Conservation Voters is a statewide nonpartisan organization that uses political action and education to protect the state's land, air, and water and communities.
Thank you so much. I always appreciate the opportunity to talk to the Baltimore City Commission and appreciate the work that the Sustainability Commission does on behalf of my city, which is Baltimore City. I appreciate this talk and the introduction. Just very quickly, there are a number of, so the environmental community writ large is about, there are 50 or more organizations that work in environmental statewide policy. And every year they vote on we make decisions as a community about what our priority topics will be during the course of the year. This year, there are 3 bills that are, and I think somebody will be talking about the Empower bill later. So I just want to very quickly touch on the other 2 community priority bills, and then focus on actually one that's a Maryland League of Conservation Voters priority that is not a broader community priority, but has a great deal of support. There's a bill called the Clean Water Justice Act, which will offer another legal avenue towards helping to force companies that are polluters to stop illegal pollution and work with state agencies to push them towards that. And that's and again, it's going to be called the Clean Water Justice Act, and it'll be sponsored by Delegate Sarah Love from Montgomery County and Senator Malcolm Augustine from Prince George's County. The other community priority is called the Whole Watershed Pilot Program, which is we're looking at our ways of how we can clean the bay. And the efforts that we've been taking so far have not we've made progress, but not the kind of substantive progress that we need to. So we're looking at new approaches. So this bill, which is actually also going to be introduced by Delegate Sarah Love and Senator Sarah Elfreth, representing the Chesapeake Bay Commission, talking about identifying 5 watersheds across the state to focus and look at a way to look at a holistic approach to reducing pollution, both legal approaches, restoration approaches, permitting approaches, and really trying to figure out how they can all work together to make progress on that. And if that process works, it would be a pilot program that would help to model better restoration and watershed improvement over the course of is part of our bigger efforts. So those 2 bills plus the Empower Reform bill that somebody will be talking about later are the 3 community priorities writ large. But the one that I wanted to sort of make sure I focused on is actually one that is being introduced by the inimitable Delegate Regina Boyce, which is about environmental justice permitting. And this is especially important for Baltimore City. It's when the delegate mentioned about what sort of having to start all over again, afresh on things that don't work. This is one of the bills that I think she was probably talking about. This was a bill that was introduced last year. It got a vote in one of the committees, but it failed from there. But we're going to be prioritizing getting this done next year. And it really is a way to try to ensure that the state permitting agencies, the Department of the Environment, is able to use this environmental justice screening tool that they have to make decisions about permitting, both issuing new permits and permit renewals. They have this information about overburdened and underserved communities, about the pollution impacts, but they're not able to use that information. Right now, they're not allowed to use that information in their decision-making process. And that disconnect between those two, that having the information and being able to use this information has been challenged to actually being able to fulfill our commitments to relieving the impacts and preventing future negative impacts from overburdened pollution for overburdened communities that have been suffering and having permit after permit after permit issued in their communities without consideration of all the other permits that have already been issued, all the other pollution that's already been incurred. So this is going to be incredibly important for Baltimore City. It's going to be incredibly important for the state generally. And we are very grateful for the delegates' leadership. And those are the ones that I had wanted to touch on. I think that is my time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being within the time. I know we got I know at least I have a ton of questions I want to add on to that, but in the sake of time, we'll keep the train moving. If anyone else has questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat and we can see if we can address them after the meeting. But I'm going to call on our next speaker, who is the president of the Baltimore Transit Equity Coalition. So we've been doing a lot of talk about transit. Samuel Jordan is going to speak to us from Baltimore Transit Equity Coalition. They seek to build and lead informed regional constituency that will pursue an equitable, reliable, and multimodal connected modern transportation system for Central Maryland.
Thank you, friend, and good afternoon. Can you hear me well? I think you may all have addressed the echo issue, perhaps. But I do want to thank you very much for the opportunity to participate with you in this meeting of the Sustainability Commission. And I would begin by giving props and thanks to the great Avis Ransom, who introduced us to this Sustainability Commission. And I want to also thank Ben Zaitchik, who's been an extremely valuable ally with the work that we've done on this question, the intersectionality between public transportation and the environment and climate change response. I would say that our work began in a more formal way with the now collapsed Transportation and Climate Initiative. When it did collapse, our governor wouldn't sign it, and only 4 of the 13 actually did sign. So it was a no-brainer. It was not going anywhere, a non-starter. But nevertheless, we took an idea that we had to the team we were working with at Johns Hopkins. I had been doing 4 years of co-teaching there, and they agreed to help to do a mapping study, a study that would help locate the communities in the city of Baltimore that were in most urgent need of investments in abatement of pollution, particularly the impacts of transportation sector generated pollution and the adverse health impacts, and of course, that connection with transit and the lack of transit equity. So we published a study in 2021 called Transit Equity and Environmental Health in Baltimore City. We got a great deal of support and distribution of that study. It also happened to be Baltimore's first transit equity analysis in its history. But nevertheless, to proceed, I want to mention that Kristen Harbison's remarks are very, very much germane to the work that we want to do, and I want to discuss briefly in my comments. First of all, we're in a crisis at the moment. I just want to mention it, but not in passing. You know that we're in a crisis in transportation budgeting, issues of state of good repair, the actual safety of the systems, and there has been very little talk about solutions. We can talk about that in future, but what it means is that we want to make sure that the modal choice question is decided in favor of light rail transit. Light rail transit is the champion of response to climate change, getting more people out of their cars, and reducing the CO2 loads that are brought by the transportation sector. You're familiar with these issues with respect to the pollution and transportation sector. So I'll move on to what we're doing. We identified 6 clusters of communities in Baltimore City in need of urgent investments in pollution abatement, the treatment of pollution's adverse health impacts. And the study, as I mentioned, was also the first ever transit equity analysis in Baltimore. We of the city and the state to apply the methodologies and recommendations statewide, and to continue with a new project that we've begun in association with Johns Hopkins and NASA to use satellite infrared technology to map pollution also in the Baltimore region and the state. So our needs with respect to legislation at the state, county, and city levels, the need for hyperlocal emission measurement in order that we might know clearly with a little more detail, due to the absence, the deficit in monitors across the state and in the region. In the region, we have 3 EPA monitors. And of course, that's not enough. So our administrative and legislative action will move, 1, to provide regional and state mapping of the pollution centers, of the areas that need more attention given to the health impacts of pollutants, and of course, their connection with transit inequity. In addition to seeking the statewide application through legislative actions as well as administrative, we would also make you aware of the fact that we're organizing and have hired an EJ organizer to help build the knowledge base among the communities along the Red Line Light Rail corridor. That's a 14.2-mile corridor, and we've already reached out and spoken with about 12 of the community associations along that corridor to discuss practical measures that can be taken by communities, families, households, of course, with respect to response to climate change and environmental destruction. So following that, what we have seen is the need to encourage the recruitment and the deployment of environmental justice organizers at the state, county, and local level districts. For example, here in Baltimore, we have 14 districts, legislative districts. Does each legislative district have an environmental justice organizer? At the level of the state, 23 jurisdictions, county jurisdictions, in addition to the city of Baltimore, do they have environmental justice organizers? At the state level, is there coordination? What we would like to see is that at each level, city, county, state, conferences of those organizers, in order that they might form what's close to what you might call a professional association, exchanging data, examples of projects that work, of course, and develop a general vision for environmental justice measures and projects at the state level, at the county level, at the city level. And it would also help to make a career ladder for environmental justice organizers. So our goals in Digest to apply the BTAC JHU study statewide, secure hyperlocal emission measurements, use the NASA pollution mapping project to supplement the data in our statewide application, and to make systematic placement and reportage of pollution monitors. We're also adding a new twist to our advocacy for the completion of the Red Line Light Rail project. That is the approved, funded Red Line Light Rail project that was canceled by Governor Hogan in 2015, not what we call the bogus red line of the East-West Corridor study. We can deal with that a little later when we can give more time to it. But we also want to research the use of renewable energy to power the light rail system. When we've talked about it among our allies in the transit advocacy community, we get a shrug. Like, really? Should this be done? Can we do it? Of course. But what you also know is that renewable energy, as it becomes more widely used, it is progressively less expensive each passing year. So it's a gift that keeps on giving at a lower cost. So if cost is one of the major elements in deciding the modal choice between bus rapid transit and light rail transit, we should choose, of course, the possibility of powering the propulsion in the system by renewable energy. Solar is available. Around the world, the best example is in Chile. From its capital city, it runs its entire light rail system on solar. And the power that is the solar array is in the Atacama Desert, 400 kilometers away. It can work in Baltimore, and we want to do that. So
Thank you,
we
Samuel.
would research that, and we would have these issues brought to your attention in greater detail.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Samuel. That was extremely interesting. Unfortunately, we're limited on time, but I would definitely like to hear more about that, being in energy myself. We appreciate that. If you guys have any questions for Samuel, we can just pop them in the chat and we'll try and get around to them toward the end of the conversation or at a later date. I want to bring on the next speaker, and that's Jennifer Kunz. I hope I got that right, of Maryland, the organizing director of Clean Water Action. Clean Water Action works to build networks, empowering communities throughout Maryland to protect our health and the environment.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everybody, for having us today. I am trying to share some slides really quick. I think this is correct. Yes. Yes, Jennifer Kunze with Clean Water Action, and we're an organization that was founded originally back in the day to organize to get the Clean Water Act passed, which is why we have our name. But we work on a lot of different issues, not only water issues, and we work a lot in Maryland on solid waste management. I'm going to talk about two bills today about solid waste. And in particular, I want to mention these are bills that really address the financial situation that the state is in that my delegate, Delegate Smith, was speaking to a moment ago. One bill, the first bill, takes money that the state is already spending and spends it more wisely. And the second bill creates a new dedicated source of funding for better waste management systems. So I think these are really important bills whose time has come, and especially in the fiscal situation we're in this year, are going to be really important for the Sustainability Commission and city residents to support. So the first bill I'm going to talk about is called the Reclaim Renewable Energy Act. It's one that many of you may have heard of before, but some of you may not. So on the screen here, you see what is probably a very familiar site down on Russell Street by Second Chance and by the casino. This is our trash incinerator where the waste from Baltimore City and Baltimore County is burned. People sometimes don't know that the state of Maryland classifies this facility, even though it emits significant greenhouse gases and local air pollution that harms our health, as renewable energy. And that means that through a program called the Renewable Portfolio Standard, or the RPS, that requires utilities in Maryland, like BGE, to subsidize increasing amounts of renewable energy over time with money from our electricity bills. This trash incinerator is getting a chunk of that money that would otherwise have been going to wind and solar power, and that's a big problem. The Reclaim Renewable Energy Act will fix that problem, take trash incineration out of the renewable energy program, and put the money back towards wind and solar where it belongs. There's a lot of reasons to do this, and one of them is for creating renewable energy, which trash incineration is not. A new study that came out this year specifically looked at the question of how does trash incineration compare to what we normally think of as renewable energy, and even to energy across the grid. And this study found that incinerators pollute more greenhouse gases per amount of energy than any other power source, including coal. We don't call coal renewable energy. We really can't call trash incineration renewable energy. And the study also found that incineration emits more criteria air pollutants, the stuff that actually harms our health, than the sources of energy that would replace it. So it's really a mistake to call incineration renewable energy, and especially to be wasting our money on it. And there's a lot of nitty-gritty details about how the system works that I would love to get into in more time. But I just want to bring attention to a couple of conclusions from a really important study that the legislature asked the Department of Natural Resources to do a couple of years ago about this program to subsidize renewable energy. It's hundreds of pages of in-depth analysis. It's really great. And it found that the RPS, including polluters like trash incineration in it, had resulted in modest greenhouse gas reductions, definitely not the aggressive ones that we need to have, but importantly that it may be working at cross purposes with the state's efforts to reduce NOx and SOx, nitrogen oxide and sulfur dioxide emissions, which again are what harm our health. And it even found that because the RPS included polluters like trash incineration in it, the energy sources being subsidized by the RPS polluted as much NOx and SOx as the entire grid. No reduction in nitrogen oxide and sulfur dioxide pollution between the RPS sources, the renewable energy sources, and not. And that's the result of averaging out trash incineration with solar, which doesn't reduce NOx and SOx at all. So that really shows how badly trash incineration and subsidizing it is impacting our renewable energy programs and their performance. And finally, I want to share a couple of numbers about what this actually means dollars and cents wise for the money that we're spending. I'm starting the clock here in 2019 for two different reasons. One, in the original way that the legislature designed the RPS when it was created in 2004, subsidies for trash incineration were a part of it, but they were actually in a category that was supposed to sunset in 2019. And so the original way the RPS was created before it was then changed in 2011 was that subsidies for incineration were supposed to go away in 2019. And then the other reason to start the clock then is that in 2019, Maryland took on a new goal of reaching 50% renewable energy through the RPS program. And that increased the demand for what are called RECs, which represent a megawatt of energy, and buying and selling and trading those is how this market-based mechanism that the RPS works. A very complicated market-based system, but looking at the dollars and cents, we can see that since 2019, when these subsidies had been supposed to go away anyway, the amount of money that we're wasting on trash incineration that should be going to renewable energy is increasing dramatically over time, from $8.5 million in 2019 to $24.7 million last year that could have been going to subsidize trash, wind and solar, not trash incineration. And also, I think definitely, certainly here in the city, a lot of people are concerned about are thinking a lot about the subsidies that are going to our trash incinerator here down on Russell Street, Bresco. But it's actually receiving the least subsidy. The most is actually going out of state to an incinerator in Lorton, Virginia, that's one of the biggest polluters in the DC region. And then Montgomery County's incinerator, the other incinerator in Maryland, is also receiving vastly more subsidies than the incinerator in Bresco is. So this really isn't a good deal for anybody except for the companies that operate these incinerators. It's a bad deal for us, definitely as Baltimore City residents, and it's something that needs to change. Fortunately, the time has come to change it. Baltimore City government officially this year submitted Mayor Scott's administration submitted testimony in support of the bill, as did Montgomery County government and Frederick County government. And you may have seen in Maryland Matters just this morning that this year the Maryland Commission on Climate Change also endorsed removing trash incineration from this renewable energy program. So we really hope that this is going to be the year for this important bill to pass. And there's a couple different ways of how you can help that. Given the time, I will just put in the chat when I'm done. I want to make sure I have a minute to talk about the second bill, which is on the solution side. We know we don't want trash incineration. We don't want to be subsidizing trash incineration. We want to be building alternatives to trash incineration. And we really focus a lot at Clean Water Action on composting because it's a solution for so many different things. Collecting our food scraps and our compostable waste separately and composting it can reduce methane emissions from landfills and carbon dioxide emissions from incinerators by a huge amount, even if you're not doing every single food scrap, and this is from a great report called Zero Waste to Zero Emissions. Composting is also really good for all kinds of things to do with carbon sequestration in the ground, increasing soil's ability to hold stormwater and reduce flooding, which is a big concern here in the city. There's so many different reasons to be building up our infrastructure to collect food waste separately and compost. And we are going to have a bill to do that I believe Delegate Boyce is going to be the sponsor of, that will, long story short, keeping an eye on the time, create a new source of funding to create pots of money to support food rescue, to get food into the hands of hungry people, developing composting infrastructure, and doing a better job of getting our food scraps out of the landfills and incinerators and into composting. This is a bill we're really excited about, and again, it will be creating a new pot of money that disincentivizes throwing away our trash at landfills and incinerators, and instead both incentivizes and creates funds for other types of infrastructure. And just to close it out, this is not legislation, but it's very important and timely, so I wanted to give it a moment. Right now, as a result of legislation that passed last year, the Maryland Department of Education has a grant program available for public schools across the state to start food waste rescue, diversion, and compost programs. So I'll put a link in the chat. If you are connected with a school who you would like to see start composting or reducing their food waste, tell your principal, let your school know. There's this grant opportunity up until January 13th. And I will close it out there and put some information in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was enlightening and very thorough. And just as you did, I'll invite the other presenters before you to put their contact info in the chat and other links to things they spoke about as well. All right. So next up, I want to invite Justin Berry. Justin Berry is working with Green and Healthy Homes Initiative as an analyst, a policy analyst focused on climate, energy, and equity. And he's going to talk about their efforts in both the short and long term. Justin?
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Jared. Very appreciative of the opportunity to be here, join you all. I'm going to do my best to also share my screen, which if that doesn't work, I will give up on that quickly. Well, I'm going to pass on that. Sorry. But again, appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk to everybody. Green and Healthy Homes Initiative is a nonprofit based in Baltimore City that does work across the nation. We are dedicated to addressing the social determinants of health and advancement of racial and health equity through creation of healthy, safe, and energy efficient homes. For legislative session, I'm going to spend most of my time here talking about a bill that Kristen brought up this morning, which is on Empower Reform.
Justin, one real quick interruption. I just promoted you to be a presenter, so you might be able to share your slides now.
All right, great. Let me try again. Still having troubles. I think it's on my end, so I will just focus on what I say. I appreciate you trying to help, though. Great. So this Empower bill. Empower is our statewide energy efficiency program. Everyone pays into it on their utility bills, and those investments are used by the utilities and by the Maryland departments to invest in energy efficiency that benefits both the people who receive those services and everyone by bringing down our total energy costs. The bill that we are focused on here is a bill that will update that program from being focused on electricity consumption to having a target for greenhouse gas emission reductions. So really important with our state climate goals, that our efficiency program is in alignment with that. A couple of things that will allow is, one, it will allow the program to support fuel switching, moving households from using gas to using electricity, which can be renewable. That'll be really helpful for the program overall. The bill will also have some additional protections to make sure that the program prioritizes lasting measures that move towards our long-term climate goals, and de-emphasizes some of the short-term things that can help for 1 year, but maybe won't last. And 3, it protects consumers by ensuring the program costs are fair to ratepayers, since all of these costs of the program impact what people are paying on their bills. The bill will update some of the ways those costs are measured and paid back to make sure they're more fair. As Kristen mentioned, this is a bill that has a broad coalition in support of it. It has environmental groups, it has energy groups, consumer advocates, housing advocates. The bill was actually introduced last year, and to point to some of the process things that came up at the beginning of the call, it didn't move through by that midnight deadline on Sine Die, but a lot of work went into it, bringing together this broad base of coalitions. So we're confident and optimistic that work will lead to a really strong bill coming forward this year. The bill is actually going to be introduced by the administration through the Public Service Commission that works on a lot of the utility issues. And we're expecting the sponsors to be the leads in the House Economic Matters Committee, C.T. Wilson and Brian Crosby, the delegates there, and the Senate Education, Energy, and Environment Committee, where Brian Feldman is the senator leading that. So again, this is a bill that has a lot of different groups involved in supporting it. So I can highlight some of the opportunities there in the chat and follow up with some of the groups doing some of the outreach and coordination for it. With my last minute or two here, I want to highlight a couple other things that may be interesting to members of the commission that we're following, not quite the same way of supporting this Empower bill, but things on our radar that may be of interest. One, in the healthy housing world, there's expecting to be a bill that would update the lead licensing fees that landlords are paying as a part of the inspections for lead on their properties. So our organization has a long history of working with lead in Baltimore City. So this is something that we're going to be following closely, maybe something that is of interest to others as well. And then finally, another point to kind of some process things is that we'll be following the implementation of both the Climate Solutions Now bill that passed a couple years ago, as well as a different Empower bill setting low-income savings targets that passed last year. And I know one of the things that was noted for this commission meeting is what are ways people can get involved. Just want to highlight, after the bills are passed, in both of those cases, there's different task force and working groups that follow through on how the bill is going to be implemented and how the law will turn into practice. So following the laws even after they pass can be a really important way for members of the public and anyone else for staying engaged in making sure they're fully realized and have all of the positive benefits we're looking forward to. So I'll stop there and looking forward to further conversation with everyone.
Great. Thank you, Justin. You're right at the mark. You must have had a timer going on right beside you. So as always, if you have any additional information, especially to share about Green and Healthy Homes Initiative or the new changes to Empower Maryland that are proposed, feel free to drop them in the chat as well. Last but not least, I want to invite Maggie Onstall of the National Aquarium in Baltimore. She's the Senior Conservation Policy Manager, and she focuses on policy related to urban conservation and diversity, climate change and resiliency, and ocean and human health. Maggie, I'll invite you to the stage.
Hi there. Sorry, I was pausing because our building loudspeaker announcement was going off that the aquarium is now closed. So I thought I would let that finish. And I'm also going to try to share a few slides. Do I have to share my whole desktop or how does that work? I haven't used WebEx Share. Maybe I won't. That's okay.
If you click the share button, it gives you the option, just like.
Thank you.
So.
Yep.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you so much to the commission for having the showcase and for being able to share a little bit and for being to hear from fellow leaders and advocates. It's really appreciated. Really briefly, for those who aren't aware, the National Aquarium has a conservation action plan with 3 overarching broad goals that really guide our work, but also guide how we decide which advocate priorities to act on. And those 3 overarching goals are to combat climate change, save wildlife and habitats, and stop plastic pollution. We obviously do this work, no one, no one organization or a set of advocates can achieve these goals. Are there people not mute? I think there's some feedback right now.
Yeah, sorry. If everybody can mute their mic real quick. Thank you.
Sorry, excuse me. Obviously, nobody can achieve these very large overarching goals alone. And so we're really honored to be able to work with some of the advocates that we've already heard from this evening. The National Aquarium is part of the Citizens Campaign on the Environment. And so we obviously support the community priorities that Kristen outlined earlier or mentioned earlier. And so I we also are part of the Choose Clean Water Coalition, which is a Chesapeake Bay wide coalition focused on improving watershed health. And we are the Maryland affiliate of the National Wildlife Federation, which brings with it, some opportunities to oh, goodness gracious, I'm so sorry. Skipping through the slides quickly, which brings it, being a National Wildlife Federation affiliate also brings with it the ability to pull in expertise from that organization where necessary. Some of the, excuse me, some of the previous successful bills that we've worked on, public policy is iterative. It's an iterative process. And so, we can advocate for certain bills one year and then build on those successes as groups and as advocates in current years. We have worked on, we have obviously supported the Climate Solutions Now Act, the Power Act, the Climate Equity Act that was mentioned earlier. We will support that again this year. Within each of our goals, we've supported a variety of important Maryland laws, from urban trees to green space equity, polystyrene foam container ban that has helped to significantly limit the litter that has entered the watershed, and the producer responsibility for packaging materials, which did establish a study to hopefully set up a full system of extended producer responsibility on mainly plastic packaging materials. And so, to Justin's point earlier, really trying to focus also on the implementation of statutes once they're enacted. For 2024, so far, we expect that there will be a few others that we will prioritize as the session plays out. But I'm trying to see if there's, I'm so sorry. My screen is not cooperating. I apologize. In terms of the 2024 session, we are supportive of many of the bills that have already been highlighted. I would just like to focus on a few others. And if it's okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I can't actually see my notes. So take a mental image. We are also supportive. My computer is really not cooperating, and I apologize. That's back to me. Thank you. I want to make sure to get the information right. So the vernal pools legislation, which will be sponsored by Delegate Hill, is really geared around addressing the recent Supreme Court decision that minimized protections for U.S. waters. Vernal pools are really critical to watershed health, and this would be a study bill that would assess their abundance and distribution. We are also interested in working on invasive species reform to include much needed changes to the state's invasive species program. And I know I'm at time, so I will go ahead and stop there. And thank you. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties on my end.
No problem. Thank you, Maggie. And sorry, I felt like we were missing out on some good content, but we're going to go ahead and move on to questions. So we have just a few pre-prepared ones, just that we wanted to ask the panel as a whole about getting involved and really engaging their legislators and also organizations to get their agendas pushed and promoted for their communities. So one of the questions I have is, what are a couple suggestions for the panel that you have for residents to advocate for themselves and their communities in regards to upcoming legislation? So I remember a couple of folks, we have emails here down the contact, as well as getting involved in the legislative session for testimony. Are there any other ways that you all would suggest that people get involved, like petitions, even coming to a committee meeting like this and bringing up issues? Panel? For our panel members.
I can take a stab at it. And then, first of all the organizations that you've heard of today have we are engaged in helping to communicate to citizens about how they can get involved in all the bills that we've worked on. So be in touch with us and we'll let you know what's happening. We have listservs, we have email lists, we have action alerts, and we're very happy to make sure that you know what's happening with the legislative session, and how you can get involved and what the right time is to get involved, and help you with messaging to help you communicate with your elected officials. Also, I think the elected officials in Annapolis are very accessible. They work very hard and they really want to hear from you. So reach out to them about the things that are important to you, knowing that you are the only person who can tell your story about why something is important to you. And that is really important for them to hear. You may not know everything about a subject, but you know what is important to you and why it's important to you. And it's important that legislators hear from you about what is important to you. There are a couple of events, and there are always events in Annapolis where people can gather to learn more about the legislation and to organize around different actions. There are lobby days. There's an environmental summit at the end of January where the community priorities will all be spoken about in more depth. So be in touch with us, and we would love to help you get more involved.
Yeah, and I'll add as well, like Delegate Boyce mentioned at the beginning, it is a lot easier for somebody from home or from your day-to-day life to follow what's happening in Annapolis now than it was 4 or 5 years ago. Everything's on video, recorded. You can watch it live. You can go back and watch it later, and you can track when bills that you're interested in are going to come up on agendas. And so you can really see what the conversation looks like, who's testifying in support of a bill that you do like or you don't like and want to oppose, and what the conversation looks like and what your delegates might need to hear to convince them to support or oppose something. And so, yeah, I'd really put in a plug for everybody to create an account on the General Assembly website. You can flag bills that you're interested in to get updates on, and really watch for yourself. And that's the best way to really get a feel for how the General Assembly works and how you can get involved yourself. Although, to Kristen's point, it's good to get with a group that's working on something you're interested on, because even with all that extra accessibility that didn't used to exist, it is still a puzzle to follow what's happening sometimes.
Thank you. I want to invite Zoe Ginshimer of Baltimore Tree Trust. She has some other, actually helped prepare these questions, and has some other ones that she'd like to ask the council, or the panel as well.
Good evening, everyone. Appreciate your time and expertise here. This is really important for residents to hear. And it's also great to hear that a lot of these bills are specifically working to mitigate the impacts on historically marginalized communities, especially in the context of Baltimore City. As Delegate Smith alluded to earlier, we have a long history of industrialization and environmental injustice. So I wanted to zoom in a little bit on the EJ permitting bill that Kristen mentioned and championed by Delegate Boyce. We've talked about how folks can submit testimony, but what types of arguments and talking points might actually move legislators to act in regards, to this bill and to the importance of environmental injustice?
So I would say sometimes, respectfully, it's not about being moved. Sometimes what happens is I think something is like the best idea, and then once it goes to committee and subcommittee to be vetted, it's not. It's a great idea, but it has sometimes unintended consequences in other areas. In this case, last year, the bill was too broad in that it added some agencies and requirements that not only stalled the bill, but made it, I think it took away from its main objective, which was just looking at environmental permits and how we or how MDE looks at those permits as it relates to the EJ score, and then can say it wants to further analyze to see if this will work or not. So this year, we took the amended version of the bill from the Environment Subcommittee, and we have submitted that bill as a strategy that kind of hones in on exactly what it is that we want to do. And that is essentially, in broader terms, is give the Secretary of the Environment the ability, if absolutely necessary, and I want to caution this, if it's legal and if it's permissible, and if they can have the data to back it up, to either ask that the permit be altered, and in bigger cases, yes, can be denied, or in again, some cases, it's just also accept it's going through additional scrutiny because of the EJ score that's required to be put on the permit application to begin with. So this is just really about doing something I think we all should be doing. I think more often than not, especially as a member of the state's EJ Commission, we kind of leave environmental factors up to the environment, when environmental factors, I think, affect every area, every department, whether it's commerce or whether it's housing or whether it's labor or whether it's whatever. It kind of affects every department. And so in this case, we're just looking at this as it relates to communities that have been underserved and overburdened, and whether or not we are essentially causing more harms when we just kind of let a permit go, or we have to just, do a little bit more scrutiny. So I think certainly advocating, saying that, you want the secretary to have these authorities to be able to scrutinize permits a little more than anything else. I hope that answered the question.
Can I just ask a really quick follow-up question, Delegate Boyce? So if a community member wants to become aware of the permits that are being pulled for their specific area community, is there a quick, easy website that they can see that, or
Right,
like a public hearing?
So they can, I believe, the way it is you can opt in to get those. So like I get an email more often than not that says, discharge permit for X, Y, and Z, check it here. So they can opt in, and the permit bill also has the requirement to help people opt in to be able to see if and when these what they call 1-1 environmental permits are being applied for. And I can pull up that email and that link and send it in.
That'd be perfect if you could place it in the chat. Thank you. I think you just hit on one as well, but this is one of Zoe's questions, but we all had in mind. And you all answered a lot of these, but bills for impacting historically marginalized communities. I know that actually we talked about a lot in transportation, water, even what you just talked about, but are there any more that are specifically designed with equity in mind and the equity in environment and environmental justice in mind for this
I'm sorry, I don't think
legislative
I
session?
understood. I don't think I understood the question. Are you asking, are there any other permits being scrutinized through legislation?
No. I'm asking if there are any other bills that focus specifically or have a strong environmental justice focus. So we've talked about several of them. It seems like a lot of the people we've heard, or a lot of the bills we heard about tonight do. Was that the intent of the bill, and just to include more environmental justice related issues and topics because people have brought them forth, or it's just kind of a natural thing that people advocate for and our representatives advocate for, and they've just happened to come in the assembly this year for the legislative session?
I think it's a combination of both. I think one of the main things is that the new the new Secretary of the Environment has an environmental justice priority. And so I think there are folks who are using now as an opportunity to put that before the legislature. So I think it's a little bit of everything, whether it's legislators or it's the actual department itself or groups coming up. So I think it's just a hot topic, and it's just a little bit of everybody's priority. I don't think it was planned, I should say.
Yeah, I will just build on what the delegate said. This is not something that, this is something, the focus, there is a tremendous focus, I think. Most bills, the question about how is this affecting impacted communities becomes something that is part of every conversation in a way that it didn't be. This will be my 14th legislative session, and I'll tell you the difference between this legislature and the legislature 14 years ago is worlds different. And that is because of the work of so many people who have been saying this is important and speaking out and getting people elected who have it as a priority. And so it is because of so much of the work of so many people getting invested and engaged in the process that this has become something that more and more legislators are leading with, and more community groups, or organizations are leading legislation that focuses around it and centers what we're doing in equity more and more. And a lot of the people, and Jennifer has done extraordinary work on this. Lots of people in this group have done great work on building this fundamental and grounding us in concepts of equity as we move forward in legislative and our legislative advocacy. But it is not something that just happened. It happened because of a lot of work from a lot of people, both inside and outside the legislature.
I have one more question for you all. So as someone who does a lot of hands-on tree planting and action-based work, what is one action residents can take as a result of this conversation? That could include, additional resources on these bills or upcoming legislative previews they should attend or promote. And if everyone could just share like one sentence on one action from each of the speakers.
I would say that the session is exhaustive. So if you have the time, sure, get involved in everything you can. If you don't, find one thing that you're really passionate about and work that avenue, work with that organization that's working for that particular bill.
I'm happy to go next, and a challenge to do in one sentence, but something that's a bit of a tangent, I think, is, finding ways to be consistently involved and thinking long term. And one thing I wanted to highlight here is that part of my role is following what's happening with the federal government, and there's been big bills that have been passed the last couple of years, and that money's slowly trickling down towards the local and to support grassroots. And a big priority in some of those things, the Inflation Reduction Act and infrastructure, is supporting environmental justice and supporting communities. And so there's resources that are starting to become available to help with organizations building up their capacity to be involved in legislative advocacy and environmental justice and take on projects. And so if you're connected to a group, whether an organization or grassroots, that is trying to do more and struggling with the capacity, seeking out those opportunities, we think can become really helpful in the coming years, so that there's more and more support for being able to do this work and staying engaged in an exhaustive session, as the delegate pointed to.
I think to echo the staying engaged point, really important to keep up find out who represents you if you don't know already, and keep up a dialogue with them, not just one-off conversations, but contacting them by email and phone calls when there's something important that is going on an issue that you care about, and really keeping up not just a one-off, but communication on an ongoing basis is really important. And As a one-off, please email your legislatures using the link I'm putting on in the chat to support the Reclaim Renewable Energy Act right now.
Yeah, and I think there have been a number of things they put in the chat about opportunities to get engaged. There are a couple of legislative summits giving more information similar to this one, other legislative previews. I think what everybody says, take one action. Take one action of something that you care about. And if you have the ability to take more than one action, do that. But take care of yourself, because it's a lot of work. And it's a lot of, and it can be overwhelming. And there's so many things to care about. So just do one thing, and do one thing at a time. And so take care of yourself, because if we all do one thing all the time, then we can do a lot more work.
I would echo all of the above, and would just add as one action, if talk about policies that you're interested in or want to learn more about, or that you think are important, not only with your decision makers and any of our groups, but with your friends and family. We know studies show that there's a perception, taking climate change as a broad topic. We know in this country that the majority of people support more action and more policy change towards addressing the climate change crisis that we're all facing, right? But there's a perception that people are like, oh, I'm scared to talk about it. And so I think just thinking through, like, talking about the things that you care about and how they may or may not relate to policy changes is just a habit we can all build.
Any other panelists have anything to add?
I want to add one more thing. Sometimes, whether it's like a League of Conservation Voters or maybe it is the aquarium, they will get folks to sign on to form letters. And so it's essentially X amount of people saying about a certain bill, which is fine. I tend to respond to emails that have been directly sent to me. Those form letters, though, that come in, sometimes they come at 100, 500 at a time. I save them and I put them in a folder, because sometimes I'll see, oh, wait a minute, Maggie sent me something. Maggie never really sends anything, but she made it a point to put her name on this form letter. Not only am I already paying attention, but now I'm paying attention a little more, because I know that's my constituent. Or I see that it's like, 5 of my constituents who I know are always active, but then I see 5 of my constituents that usually are not very vocal in that way. And I would argue it makes me pay attention even a bit more. And then sometimes I'll go in there to see if maybe they altered the email or sent something else. But it makes me perk up and pay attention. And I do keep all those emails to gauge who is sending those letters. Is it the same 5 people that argue about the same 5 things every year? Okay, I put it in there. But then it's when it's so many, and then I start recognizing those names, and I start recognizing my constituents, and especially the folks, respectfully, who are not as engaged, I think is important to me more than anything else. Because the people who are engaged are people who are engaged. You're always checking in with them. You're always talking with them. But it's the people who generally you never really hear from in that way makes me perk up a little bit. And so, as flooding as they are to my inbox, I think it is important, because it gives me the ability to see who is really paying attention and who really has feelings on this beyond, respectfully, the usual suspects.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and all of our panelists, too. This has been very enlightening, and I think it's real good information for the commission to hear, put everything into context about what we do. So I just want to thank you all for giving us the time today, giving us some great information.
Thank you for the invitation. It's always good to see you.
Okay, so I think that Mia, if you're on the line, I think if you don't have anything additional, I think we might wrap it here. If none of the commissioners has anything additional to add. And also the links in the chat here, we will try and download all the conversations and the links and resources that were included here, and make them available somehow to everyone who was at the meeting.
Yes, I'll definitely get the slides from all of the presenters and gather the links that were shared, because there are so many links in the chat that I'm sure that people want to refer to. And so when we get the combination of slides and the chat information, we'll post that on our website.
Well, thanks everyone for coming to the meeting. We'll actually have our next meeting on Wednesday, January 17th at 4:00. Information will be coming out via our usual links. Thanks everyone who presented today, and thanks for all our commissioners to attend, and see you all next year.